everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm gonna be discussing about the introduction to the study of learning according to Schunk in the year 2012. Now, according to him, there are three basic criteria of what constitutes learning. So these are: number 1, learning involves change. Number 2, learning endures over time. And lastly, learning occurs through experience. Now, what do we mean when we say learning involves change? It means that people learn when they become capable of doing something differently. At the same time, we must remember that learning is inferential. We do not observe learning directly, but rather its products or outcomes. An example to this is a girl named Sarah. Sarah wants to learn how to play guitar. At the beginning, she has no musical experience and she doesn't know how to play any musical instruments. However, she decides to take guitar lessons. Now, Sarah starts as a complete novice with no guitar playing skills. Over several months of consistent practice and lessons, Sarah begins to acquire knowledge through chords, finger placements, and strumming techniques. She practices regularly to improve her skills both in class and on her own. As Sarah learns and practices, she experiences significant changes. Her fingers become more dexterous, she gains a better understanding of musical theory, and she becomes capable of playing various songs. Now, after a year of dedicated learning, Sarah can confidently play her favorite songs and the guitar, even composing some of her own music. She has transformed from a complete beginner to a proficient guitarist. In this example, the learning process involves change as Sarah progresses from a state of ignorance to a state of proficiency in playing the guitar. We can learn in this example that learning is essentially the process of acquiring new knowledge or skills, resulting in a change in one's abilities or understanding. Now, for the next point, learning endures over time. It means that knowledge or skills acquired through the learning process are retained and remain accessible to an individual for an extended period. This concept emphasizes that when people learn something, they don't just forget it immediately. Instead, they retain and remember it for a considerable duration, allowing them to apply what they have learned in the future. So an example to this is a young child named Jason, who loves to read. He was 6 years old when his parents introduced him to the world of books by reading bedtime stories to him every night. Jason was fascinated by these stories, and his parents encouraged him to read on his own. As Jason grew older, his love for reading only intensified. He started reading more advanced books, from picture books to chapter books, and eventually to novels. He developed strong reading skills, an extensive vocabulary, and a deep appreciation for literature. Now, years later, as a teenager, Jason's passion for reading led him to explore different genres and authors. He even joined a book club at his school where he discussed books with his peers and shared his insights. Jason's reading habit had become part of his identity. Now, as an adult, Jason still cherishes his love for reading. He has a personal library filled with books from various genres, and he continues to discover new authors and stories. His early exposure to reading and the encouragement he received from her parents laid the foundation for a lifelong love of literature. Now, the knowledge and skills he gained during his childhood, reading experiences, endure over time, enriching his life and shaping his perspective on the world. Now, in this example, it illustrates how the love of learning, in this case, a passion of reading, can endure over time and become a lasting part of individual's life. Now, for the next part, learning occurs through experience. So, this process of learning involves interacting with the environment, making observations, and often making mistakes. Through these experiences, individuals can gain insights, adapt their behaviors, and improve their abilities. Now, an example to this is Jake wants to learn how to ride a bicycle. He started by getting on a bicycle and attempting to pedal, balance, and steer. Initially, he may struggle, wobble, and even fall for a few times. However, with each attempt, he gains a valuable experience. Now, after falling, he reflects on what went wrong. He might realize that he needs to pedal to move forward, and maintaining balance is essential. He starts to form concepts and strategies in his mind, such as the idea that pedaling creates forward motion and he needs to keep his body centered to the balance. Armed with his new understanding, he gets back on the bike and tries again. He actively applies his insights and attempts to pedal while maintaining the balance. Now, Jake continues to practice refining his skills through repetition and gaining more experience. With each attempt, he becomes better at riding the bike. Through this learning process of experiencing, reflecting, conceptualizing, and experimenting, the child learns how to ride a bicycle. This example illustrates how learning often occurs through hands-on experiences and personal reflection, which is a fundamental concept in experiential learning theory. Now, at this point, we're going to talk about the learning theory and philosophy. So, what do you mean by this? Now, from a philosophical perspective, learning can be discussed under the heading of epistemology, which refers to the study of origin, nature, limits, and methods of knowledge. How can we know? How can we learn something new? And what is the source of knowledge? The complexity of how humans learn is illustrated in this excerpt from Plato's Meno during the 472 or 347 BC. Now, under this topic is rationalism and empiricism. Rationalism refers to the idea that knowledge derives from reason without recourse to the senses. The distinction between mind and matter, which figures prominently in rationalist views of human knowledge. It can be traced to Plato, who distinguished that knowledge acquired via senses from that gained by reason. Plato believed that things, like for example houses or trees, are revealed to people via senses, whereas individuals acquire ideas by reasoning or thinking about what they know. Next is the empiricism. It means that experience is the only source of knowledge. The external world is the basis for human sense impressions, which in turn are interpreted as lawful, consistent, or unchanging by the mind. The beginnings of the psychological study of learning. The first one is the introduction to psychology as a science. The formal origins of psychology as a science are challenging to identity, but systematic psychological research began in the late 19th century. Wilhelm Wundt and Hermann Ebbinghaus were significant figures in early development of learning theory. Next is Wundt's psychological laboratory. Wilhelm Wundt established the first psychological laboratory in Leipzig, Germany in 1879. This marked a crucial shift from a philosophical theorizing to the experimental and empirical approaches in psychology. Wundt emphasizes the controlled experiments to study mental process. Next is the research areas in Wundt's laboratory. Wundt's laboratory attracted scholars to conduct research in various psychological phenomena including sensation, perception, reaction times, verbal associations, attention, feelings, and emotions. It played a vital role in establishing psychology as a discipline. Next is Ebbinghaus verbal learning. Hermann Ebbinghaus, although not connected to Wundt's laboratory, contributed significantly to experimental psychology. He conducted research on the memory and the principles of association. Ebbinghaus used nonsense syllables in his experiments to investigate memory and learning process. Next is Ebbinghaus experimental methods. Ebbinghaus frequently used himself as a subject in his experiments. He developed experiments to study the learning and forgetting of nonsense syllables. He found that repetition improved memory and that meaningfulness facilitated learning. Next is Ebbinghaus' legacy and concerns. While Ebbinghaus' work was historically important, there are concerns about the generalizability of his findings since he often used himself as a participant. However, many of his findings have been validated by subsequent research. He was a pioneer in bringing higher mental processes into the experimental laboratory. Structuralism is a combination of associationism with the experimental method. On the other hand, functionalism is the view that mental processes and behaviors of living organisms help them to adapt to their environment. Now, what is the role of the memory? In learning theories, it differs in their views on memory. In the behavioral theories, it focuses on neurological connections in external stimuli, while the cognitive theories emphasize memory's role in encoding and organizing knowledge. Memory is crucial for learning and affects how information is stored and retrieved. Memory perspectives influence teaching approaches. Next is the role of the motivation. Motivation impacts all phases of learning and performance. Behavioral theories define motivation as increased behavior due to reinforcement. On the other hand, cognitive theories separate motivation from learning and emphasize its role in directing attention and information processing. Cognitive processes like goals and self efficacy affect motivation. So, teachers must consider motivational factors to keep their students engaged. Next, how does transfer occur? Transfer is applying knowledge and skills in new contexts. Behavioral theories link transfer to identical elements or similar features between situations. Cognitive theories suggest transfer occurs when learners understand how to apply knowledge in various settings. Now, for the processes involved in self-regulation. Self-regulation involves learners directing their thoughts, feelings, and actions toward their goals. Behavioral researchers focus on setting up contingencies of reinforcement. Cognitive researchers emphasize mental activities like attention, learning strategies, and motivation. Choice is a critical self-regulation. Limited choices lead to external regulation. Next, implications for instructions. Theories vary in their ability to explain different types of learning. Behavioral theories are suited for simpler forms of learning based on associations. Cognitive theories are more appropriate for explaining complex learning. Commonalities exist among different forms of learning, such as the importance of attention, effort, and motivation. Effective teaching requires selecting the appropriate theoretical perspective for the type of learning and applying relevant instructional approaches. Now for the conclusion. The study of human learning examines how people acquire and modify their knowledge, skills, beliefs, and behaviors through lasting resulting from experiences or practice, excluding temporary changes due to factors like illness or fatigue. This field of research has its origin in ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and encompasses two main perspectives, which is the rationalism and empiricism. In the late 19th century, psychology started to explore learning, giving rise to early schools of thought such as structuralism and functionalism. I think that's it. Thank you for watching.